First contact with the impossible. Senior researcher Valerik Sin of the Galactic Science Institute had never seen anything quite like the three humans who just walked into her quantum mechanics laboratory. In her 240 years of studying the universe's most perplexing phenomena, she thought she had grown accustomed to surprises. She was wrong. The tallest of the three humans, Dr. Maya Chen, wore what appeared to be a jacket covered in blinking LED equations. The shortest, Dr. James Rodriguez, carried a backpack that hummed with an energy signature that shouldn't have been possible in personal equipment. And the third, Dr. Sarah O'Connor, was calmly drinking something that Valeura's sensors indicated was hot enough to melt standard hull plating. "Welcome to the Quantum Anomaly Division," Valeura said, her crystalline form shifting through shades of formal greeting blue. "Though I must admit, I'm surprised the Institute accepted human researchers so soon after your species' first contact. We're actually here about the Helios Cascade," Maya said, her LED equations shifting to display a familiar set of quantum coordinates. "We saw your distress beacon." Valeura's crystalline structure froze mid-shift. The Helios Cascade was supposed to be classified at the highest levels. Even most of the Institute's senior researchers didn't know about the quantum anomaly that had been growing at the edge of mapped space for the past 3 decades, consuming entire star systems in what appeared to be a breakdown of fundamental physical laws. "That's impossible," Valeura said. "The encryption on those transmissions was really good," James interrupted, pulling out a device that looked like it had been assembled from Earth consumer electronics and pieces of alien technology. "But when you're dealing with quantum encryption, sometimes the old-school approach works best. We built a decryption system using modified gaming consoles and my grandmother's recipe for computing prime numbers." Sarah took another sip of her molten drink. "The beacon's been broadcasting for help in every direction for months. We just happened to be the first ones to crack it using methods your scientists wouldn't consider valid." Valeura's color shifted to deep purple, the shade of scientific curiosity overwhelming protocol. "Even if you decoded the message, the mathematics involved in the cascade's behavior are beyond traditional understanding," Maya finished. Her jacket now displayed a series of calculations that made Valeura's outer crystal layer vibrate in resonance. "That's because everyone's trying to solve it using standard quantum mechanics, but we think it's not actually a quantum problem at all." James pulled out more jury-rigged equipment from his backpack. "We have a theory that the cascade is actually a much simpler phenomenon being viewed through an unnecessarily complex lens. It's like trying to understand why a car won't start by studying quantum tunneling effects in the spark plugs, when really you're just out of gas." Sarah set down her drink, its container somehow containing the impossible heat. "We're not here to take over your research or claim credit. We're here because we think we can help, and because if the cascade isn't stopped soon, it'll reach populated space within 6 months." Valeura's form cycled through several colors as she processed this. The humans had not only decoded a supposedly unbreakable encryption, but had also developed a theoretical framework that challenged centuries of established physics. And they had done it using technology that looked like it belonged in a recycling facility rather than a laboratory. The Institute's protocols for introducing new research paradigms require years of peer review and the cascade just consumed another star system while we've been talking, Maya said, her jacket displaying real-time calculations of the anomaly's growth. "We can either spend the next few years following protocols, or we can try something new. Your choice." Valeura looked at the three humans, their impossible equipment, their confident stance, their complete disregard for established scientific hierarchy. Everything about them violated the careful, methodical approach to science that had served galactic civilization for millennia. But they were right about one thing. The cascade was growing, and none of the traditional approaches had even begun to explain its behavior, let alone stop it. "The Institute's High Council will never approve this," Valeura said, her color shifting to the deep gold of decision-making. "So we'll have to work quickly before they realize what we're doing. Show me your theory." Maya's jacket erupted in a dazzling display of mathematical proofs. James began unpacking more of his hybrid technology. Sarah finished her molten drink and pulled out a tablet displaying simulations that shouldn't have been possible on portable hardware. As Valera watched these humans prepare to tackle one of the greatest scientific mysteries in galactic history, using methods that defied convention, she realized that perhaps the universe had more surprises in store than she had imagined. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what they needed. The human approach. The Institute's quantum lab had never seen anything quite like it. Where once stood pristine rows of quantum computers and perfectly calibrated measurement devices, there now sprawled what looked like a mad scientist's garage sale. James had somehow convinced the maintenance bots to help him arrange Earth electronics in patterns that made Valera's sensors glitch every time she looked directly at them. "What you're attempting is fundamentally impossible," Professor Zixtal declared, his gaseous form roiling with skepticism as he observed Maya connecting what appeared to be an ancient Earth gaming console to the Institute's most advanced quantum scanner. "You cannot possibly analyze a quantum-level phenomenon using such primitive technology." "That's exactly the point," Maya replied, her LED jacket now displaying what looked like a cross between a quantum wave function and a vintage video game score counter. "We're not trying to analyze it at the quantum level because we think everyone's been looking at this wrong from the start." Sarah was sprawled across 3 hover chairs, manipulating holographic displays with one hand while making notes with the other. "It's like this," she said, not looking up from her work. "When you have a massive traffic jam, you don't solve it by studying the quantum states of each individual vehicle. You zoom out and look at the flow patterns." James emerged from under a pile of wiring, his face smudged with what looked like both grease and quantum residue. "The Helios cascade isn't a quantum anomaly that's affecting normal space," he explained, connecting what appeared to be a modified Earth tablet to the lab's main systems. "It's a normal space phenomenon that's creating quantum effects as a byproduct." Valera watched as her laboratory's carefully maintained order descended into what the humans called productive chaos. Their theory was elegant in its simplicity, even if their methods were giving the Institute's AI safety protocol seizures. "But the mathematical models," Professor Zixtal began, "are perfect." Maya interrupted, "If you assume the underlying premise is correct. But what if it isn't? What if we're seeing quantum effects because we're looking for quantum effects, but they're just symptoms of something much more fundamental?" The lab's main display suddenly lit up with a new kind of visualization, one that showed the Helios cascade not as a quantum phenomenon, but as a massive disturbance in the basic fabric of space itself. It looked less like a quantum anomaly and more like a knot, Sarah said, finally looking up from her work. "Space itself is tangled, and all these quantum effects you've been measuring are just the universe trying to untie itself." The assembled alien scientists stared at the display in silence. The visualization was crude by Institute standards, rendered using gaming software rather than scientific tools, but it showed something none of their sophisticated models had revealed: a pattern. "This is why our containment efforts have been failing," James added, pointing to what looked like a video game power-up icon on the display. "Every time we try to suppress the quantum effects, we're actually making the knot tighter. It's like trying to untangle headphones by pulling on both ends." Valera's crystalline form sparkled with sudden understanding. "But if this model is correct, then our entire approach to containing the cascade has been making it worse," Maya finished. Her jacket now showed a simulation of their new model, predicting the cascade's growth with uncanny accuracy. "Every containment field, every attempt to stabilize the quantum fluctuations, we've been helping it grow." Professor Zixtal's gaseous form had condensed to nearly solid state, a sign of intense concentration or distress. "Even if you're correct, the implications are troubling. Our entire understanding of space-time stability would need to be reconsidered." "Science advances one funeral at a time," Sarah quoted, now building what looked like a scale model of the cascade using drinking straws and quantum field generators. Sometimes you have to be willing to throw out everything you think you know and start fresh. James had somehow convinced the lab's primary quantum computer to run Doom, while simultaneously calculating space-time curvature equations. The good news is, if we're right about this being a knot rather than a quantum anomaly, we might actually be able to untangle it. And the bad news? Villara asked, already suspecting the answer. Maya's jacket displayed a series of calculations that made several of the alien scientists' perception organs shut down in self-defense. The bad news is that our solution involves doing something that every physicist in the galaxy has agreed should never, ever be attempted. We need to create a controlled space-time fold, Sarah said, her model now looking less like drinking straws and more like a map of mathematical insanity. Think of it like using a needle to help untie a knot. We need to punch a temporary hole in reality itself. The lab erupted in a cacophony of objections. Space-time folding had been theoretically possible for centuries, but the risks were considered too great even to experiment with on the smallest scale. What these humans were proposing was like suggesting they solve a house fire by detonating a nuclear weapon. It's this or watching the cascade consume its way through populated space within 6 months, James said, his voice cutting through the chaos. We can either try something crazy that might work, or stick to our safe, proven methods that definitely won't. Villara looked at her fellow scientists, then at the humans, and their bizarre, but undeniably functional hybrid of Earth and galactic technology. In her centuries of research, she had never even contemplated breaking the fundamental taboo against space-time manipulation. But she had also never seen a threat like the cascade. "What do you need to begin?" she asked, her crystalline form shifting to the deep red of decisive action. Maya's jacket displayed what looked like a shopping list written in quantum mechanics. "First, we need to convince your eye to stop trying to arrest us for scientific heresy. Then we need about 20 more gaming consoles, some quantum processors, and ideally, a really good coffee maker." As the lab descended into either breakthrough or madness, Villara wasn't sure which. She realized that working with humans might not just change their understanding of the universe, it might save it. Breaking protocol. The Institute's emergency alert system had been screaming for the past hour. Red warning holograms filled the air, their urgent messages reflecting off Villara's crystalline form as she watched the humans execute what they called "plan probably won't destroy the universe." "Security breach in progress," the AI announced for the 100th time. "Unauthorized manipulation of fundamental forces detected. Emergency protocols." Yeah, we know," Sarah muttered, her fingers dancing across 3 different control interfaces simultaneously. "James, how's our quantum gaming rig holding up?" James emerged from beneath a towering structure that looked like someone had merged a quantum supercomputer with an arcade cabinet. "The good news is we've successfully linked 23 gaming consoles into the most powerful space-time calculation engine ever built. The bad news is we're running out of duct tape." Maya's LED jacket was now displaying warning messages in 17 different languages, including 3 that hadn't been invented yet. The cascade's growth rate just increased by another 12%. "We've got maybe 4 hours before it reaches the Proxima system." Professor Zixtal, who had surprisingly sided with the humans after seeing their initial test results, roiled anxiously near the ceiling. "The High Council is broadcasting on all frequencies. They're threatening to forcibly shut down the facility." "Let them try," Villara said, surprising herself with her own defiance. "By the time they override my security clearance, we'll either have solved the problem or—" She left the alternative unspoken. The lab had been transformed into something that would have given any traditional physicist nightmares. Gaming consoles jury-rigged to quantum processors formed a ring around a central platform. Holographic displays showed a mix of complex mathematical formula and what appeared to be high scores from various Earth games. In the corner, a coffee maker that James had modified was producing a beverage that technically violated several laws of thermodynamics. "Phase 1 complete," Maya announced. Her jacket displayed a simulation of their planned space-time fold. The quantum gaming matrix is stable. Well, as stable as anything involving 23 overclocked consoles can be. Sarah finished her calculations and took a long drink from a mug labeled physics-defying juice. Okay, here's where it gets interesting. We're going to create a controlled space-time fold using the quantum matrix as a framework. It's like using a very precise needle to help untangle a very large knot. The energy requirements are impossible, one of the junior researchers protested. Even our most advanced power systems can't. That's why we're not using them, James interrupted, patting his hybrid creation affectionately. Traditional power systems try to force their way through space-time. We're going to do something much more elegant. We're going to convince space-time to help us. Vilera watched as the humans initiated their sequence. The gaming consoles hummed in harmony, their processors working in ways their original designers had never imagined. The quantum matrix began to glow with a light that seemed to come from somewhere else entirely. First fold initiating, Maya reported. Her jacket now showed real-time calculations of space-time curvature. This is where we find out if we're brilliant or if we're about to make things much, much worse. The air in the center of the ring began to twist. Not in the normal three-dimensional sense, but in a way that made Vilera's perception organs ache. It was as if reality itself was being gently lifted and folded, like a cosmic origami project. Energy patterns are stable, Sarah called out, her displays showing readings that should have been impossible. The gaming matrix is actually doing it. It's creating a sustainable fold without triggering a cascade collapse. James was practically dancing around his creation. It's working because we're not forcing it. Traditional quantum manipulation tries to bend space-time to our will. We're just suggesting politely that it might want to try a different shape. The fold was now clearly visible, a shimmering distortion in reality that somehow looked both impossibly complex and remarkably simple. Through it, they could see the actual structure of the Helios cascade. And for the first time, it looked manageable. Holy shit, Sarah breathed, staring at her readings. We were right. It really is just a knot. A really big, really angry knot, but still just a knot. The lab's AI had given up on warning messages and was now just making confused beeping sounds. Professor Zixtal had condensed to his densest form in scientific excitement. Vilera felt her crystalline structure vibrating in harmony with the fold. Now comes the hard part, Maya said, her jacket displaying a countdown. We need to maintain this fold while simultaneously creating a second one near the cascade. It's like trying to thread a needle while riding a roller coaster. The High Council's override codes are breaking through, one of the lab technicians warned. We have maybe 20 minutes before they shut us down. James looked up from his console, his face lit by the otherworldly glow of the fold. Then we better work fast. Sarah, start the second fold sequence. Maya, keep this one stable. I'm going to try something that's either going to save us all or get me banned from every physics conference in the galaxy. As the humans pushed forward with their impossible experiment, Vilera realized that she was watching either the greatest breakthrough in the history of physics or the prelude to a disaster of cosmic proportions. And somehow, impossibly, she was okay with not knowing which it would be. The universe itself seemed to hold its breath as the second fold began to form. Crisis point. The lab's emergency lights cast strange shadows through the two space-time folds, creating patterns that shouldn't have been possible in normal three-dimensional space. The gaming consoles, now running far beyond their intended specifications, filled the air with a high-pitched whine that made Vilera's crystalline structure resonate uncomfortably. Second fold is stable, Sarah announced, though stable was a relative term when dealing with tears in the fabric of reality. But the cascade is reacting to our presence. It's like it knows we're here. Maya's LED jacket was now displaying what looked like a twisted mess of mathematical equations fighting each other. The knot is tightening. We didn't account for this level of feedback. It's like it's actively resisting our attempts to untangle it. The High Council's override sequence is at 60%. Professor Zixtol reported, his gaseous form swirling with anxiety. And the Cascade's expansion has reached the outer edge of the Proxima system. First evacuation warnings are being broadcast. James was simultaneously monitoring both folds while making adjustments to his jury-rigged quantum gaming matrix. We need more processing power. The consoles are at their limit, and we're still not generating a strong enough field to affect the Cascade's core. Vilera watched as warning messages cascaded across every display in the lab. The situation was deteriorating rapidly, and traditional physics offered no solutions. But then again, nothing about this situation was traditional. "What if," she said slowly, her crystalline form shifting to the deep purple of intense thought. "What if we're still thinking too conventionally? You humans solved the first part by completely abandoning traditional approaches. Perhaps we need to do the same thing now." Sarah looked up from her controls, her eyes bright with sudden understanding. "You're right. We're still trying to solve this like physicists. We need to solve it like gamers." "What do you mean?" Professor Zixtol asked, condensing slightly in confusion. Maya's jacket suddenly displayed a new pattern, simpler, but somehow more elegant than their previous calculations. In gaming, when you're stuck at a hard part, you don't just keep trying the same thing harder. You look for a completely different approach. A cheat code, a hidden path, a way to change the rules of the game itself. The Cascade isn't just a knot in space-time, James said, his fingers flying over the controls as he implemented their new approach. It's a puzzle. And like any puzzle, it probably has a solution that seems obvious once you see it. Sarah was already reconfiguring their equipment. Instead of trying to untangle the knot directly, what if we change the nature of the space it exists in? Like changing the properties of the string instead of pulling on the knot. The lab erupted into activity as they implemented their new strategy. The gaming consoles were reconfigured to generate what James called a reality modifier field, a concept that made several of the alien scientists' perception organs shut down in protest. "High Council override at 85%, one of the technicians warned, and the Cascade's outer edge has begun affecting the Proxima system's orbital mechanics. Now or never," Maya said, her jacket displaying what looked like the most complex cheat code ever devised. "Initiating reality modification sequence. This is either going to solve everything or create a problem so big we won't be around to regret it." The space between the two folds began to shimmer with new possibilities. Reality itself seemed to flex and bend, not fighting against them anymore, but curious about what they were trying to do. The Cascade's pattern changed, its aggressive expansion pausing as if confused by this new approach. "It's working," Sarah exclaimed, staring at readings that defied conventional physics. "The Cascade is responding to the modified spacetime parameters. It's like we're changing the rules of the game while it's being played." James's quantum gaming matrix was now operating in ways that its components manufacturers had never imagined possible. The knot is beginning to respond. Instead of fighting against it, we're changing the nature of the space it exists in, making it a space where the knot can't maintain its current form. Vilera watched in amazement as the Cascade began to shift. The reading showed something that should have been impossible. The knot wasn't being untied so much as it was being convinced to untie itself. "High Council override at 95%. Professor Zixtol announced, his form nearly solid with tension. "We have less than a minute before." A new alarm cut through the chaos. The Cascade was moving. Not expanding anymore, but changing, responding to their reality modification field in ways that none of their simulations had predicted. "Either we just solved it," Maya said, her jacket now displaying what looked like victory animations from a dozen different games, "or we just made history in a very permanent way." The lab held its breath as the Cascade reached its critical point. In the next few seconds, they would either save the galaxy or give the High Council a very good reason to ban humans from ever doing physics again. The space-time folds pulsed with possibility as reality itself waited to see what would happen next. Humanity's mark. For a moment that seemed to stretch beyond the normal flow of time, Nothing happened. Then everything happened at once. The Helios Cascade, the cosmic knot that had defied the galaxy's greatest minds for decades, began to change. Not with the violent release of energy that traditional physics would have predicted, but with something that looked almost like comprehension. It's playing along, Sarah whispered, watching as the readings on her display showed the impossible becoming reality. The cascade is actually responding to the new rules we created. Maya's LED jacket displayed a visualization of what was happening, a dance of mathematics and gaming logic that made traditional physics equations look clumsy by comparison. The knot isn't fighting us anymore. It's like it finally understands what we're trying to do. The quantum gaming matrix hummed with an almost musical tone as reality itself was gently reprogrammed. James watched his jury-rigged creation with the pride of a parent watching their child graduate. We didn't need to force it. We just needed to show it there was another way to exist. Valera's crystalline form sparkled with colors that hadn't been seen in the scientific community for generations, the hues of paradigm-shifting discovery. The cascade is untangling itself, not because we forced it to, but because we showed it how. Through the space-time folds, they could see the massive structure of the cascade transforming. The knot that had threatened to consume entire star systems was elegantly unknotting itself, following the new patterns they had introduced into the fabric of reality. High Council override complete in 5, 4, 3. Professor Zixtal began counting down. Doesn't matter, Sarah said with a grin. Look. The final strands of the cascade were already smoothing themselves out, the space-time distortions settling into natural patterns that would have been impossible under the old understanding of physics. The gaming consoles powered down one by one, their impossible task completed. Override complete, the lab's AI announced, just as the last traces of the cascade dissolved into normal space. The High Council representatives burst into the lab moments later, their various forms expressing maximum levels of scientific outrage. They froze at the sight that greeted them, a laboratory filled with Earth gaming technology connected to quantum computers, two stable space-time folds gently closing themselves, and readings that showed the complete resolution of the Helios Cascade. What did you do? The head counselor demanded, their photonic form flickering with confusion. Maya's jacket displayed a simple "game over, you win" message as she turned to face them. We changed the rules, she said simply. Sometimes the universe just needs to be shown a different way to solve its problems. But the protocols, the established theories, the fundamental laws of physics, the counselor sputtered. James was already beginning to disassemble his quantum gaming matrix, are more like guidelines, really. The universe follows them because they work most of the time, but sometimes you need to think outside the box, way outside the box, like in the next galaxy over outside the box. Sarah pulled up the final readings on the main display. We didn't break any laws of physics. We just showed them there were options they hadn't considered before. Turns out the universe is a lot more flexible than anyone thought. Valera stepped forward, her crystalline form radiating the confidence of verified discovery. Honorable Council, what these humans have demonstrated goes beyond mere problem-solving. They have shown us that our entire approach to physics may need to be reconsidered. Their methods were unorthodox, Professor Zixtal added, his gaseous form swirling with excitement. But the results are undeniable. The cascade is gone, and we have learned more about the fundamental nature of reality in the past few hours than in the past few centuries. The council members huddled together, their forms mixing in the universal sign of intense discussion. Finally, the head counselor turned back to the group. The council recognizes that while your methods were unprecedented, the results cannot be ignored. We will need comprehensive documentation of everything that occurred here. Already done, Maya said, her jacket downloading the complete record of their experiment into the Institute's databases, though you might want to create a new category in the physics archives. Maybe call it Gaming the Universe, a human approach to cosmic problem-solving. As the council members began the process of documenting and analyzing what had happened, Valera watched the three humans start packing up their equipment. They had arrived at her lab just days ago, ignored every established protocol, connected gaming consoles to quantum computers with duct tape, and solved one of the greatest scientific mysteries in galactic history. "You know," she said, her form shifting to the warm colors of realization, "this is going to change everything. Our entire understanding of physics, of reality itself." "That's kind of what humans do," Sarah replied with a smile. "We see impossible problems and think, I bet we could solve that with a video game console and some duct tape." James looked up from where he was carefully wrapping his modified gaming consoles. "Speaking of which, we have some ideas about that weird temporal anomaly in the Cygnus sector. Ever heard of something called Tetris?" Maya's jacket displayed a series of new equations, already calculating their next impossible solution. "After all, now that we've proven the universe runs on cheat codes, there's really no limit to what we might figure out next." Valera looked at her transformed laboratory, at the faces of her fellow scientists still trying to process what they had witnessed, and at the humans who had shown them all that sometimes the best solution was the one that no one else would even consider trying. The universe, she realized, would never be quite the same. And maybe that was exactly what it needed.